Believe it or not, we're a quarter of the way through the 21st century already. We're also in the midst of the dog days of summer. So we figured what better time than to look back on the last 25 years of Villanova basketball than the present. We're going to start tonight with our top five most underrated players at Villanova over the last 25 years. Who didn't get their share of the limelight, and who should we be talking about more in terms of their legendary status inside the program? We've got answers next on Holding Over. And hi, everybody. I'm Matt Janus alongside David White. This is Holy Nova, part of the Big East Energy Network. Thanks so much for being with us. You heard it right. The top five most underrated players of the last quarter century. That's the title of our show. That's what we have upcoming. But got to do a little bit of news first. In the recruiting world, something came out this week. Chris Washington, top 40 recruit in the country, according to ESPN, pretty much unanimously by all the recruiting services, have him amongst the top 50, top 60 in the country. He's out of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, is 6'7", 185-pound power forward. Now, it's a long way to go still in the process, but he put Nova in his list of top 7. So they got through the first hump. That's an important one, it feels like, for the Wildcats, as Kevin Willard continues to look to go bigger and bigger. Guard you might not be guard you anymore, David.
Yeah. Hey, size wins. I mean, I think that people saw how big Duke was last year and where that took them, but yeah, getting big on the wings is very helpful. We just talked about this in our one-on-one conversation where it's hard to beat a big wing who can handle the ball, who can drive, all those things. So I think that's a big getting in that top 7 is big for Kevin Willard. It gives him some legitimacy going into the rest of the recruiting trail.
Recruiting world seems to feel there's real momentum there for Villanova. We'll have to wait and see. We're working on nailing down a recruiting expert that'll come on with us either later this week, early next week. So make sure we keep you posted here on Holding Nova. Good to see the Wildcats, though, back in the mix for top tier high school talent. You're going to have to use the transfer portal, but you want to be bringing in guys out of high school who are elite players. I think it's your easiest path, and it also helps you build that culture that Kevin Willard's been talking about that's so important to get back with the Wildcats.
Yeah, it's really important to bring in a guy who's willing to put in the time for Nova, not a guy who's going to come in, maybe play 15 minutes a game, score 8 to 10 points, and then say, okay, well, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach. Sorry, LeBron fans, another shot at him. So hopefully these high school recruits are going to work out because, like you said, I mean, the transfer portal is here. It's here to stay. And ultimately, it's the easiest way to rebuild a roster year in and year out. But getting that young talent is going to be important to continued and sustained success.
So that's what we have to look forward to. Let's look back now. We are going to unveil our top five most underrated players of the last 25 years. Hopefully, this one goes a little bit better for me than the feedback in the one-on-one game. David, a lot of people seem to agree with you that you need a little bit more size, and we'll agree to disagree on that topic. But I think we've got these top five most underrated players in Villanova's last quarter century. Spot on. And oh, by the way, 2025 is the year, which means we're 25 years into the 21st century. I don't know about you. You're a little younger than me. But when I was a kid, the year 2025, it felt like science fiction. It still seems a little weird that that's a real year, does it not?
It does. I mean, we are officially closer to 2050 than we are to the year 2000.
Oh,
So,
don't like to hear that. I don't like to hear that even a little bit. All right, well, let's talk about the last 25 years. You see the countdown on our right, and let's unveil our first name, number 5 on the list, Michael Bradley. And that is a name that may be a little bit of a surprise for people. That is the only player on this list, I'll tell you right now, that did not play for Jay Wright during his career at Villanova. Michael Bradley was a one-year guy. He was a transfer portal ad before that was in vogue. He came from Kentucky, where he won a national championship, came to Villanova at the start of the century. It was really a last stab effort from Steve Lapis to try to infuse some talent into a team that had really been struggling, had missed the tournament 3 consecutive seasons. So they brought in Bradley. And I tell you what, it didn't work out. They didn't get to the NCAA tournament, but Michael Bradley certainly wasn't the reason why. He almost single-handedly carried that Villanova team into the NCAA tournament. He averaged 20 points per game. He was an All-American, second-team All-American with the Wildcats. And I think that there's a lot of people, especially younger Villanova fans, that either forget he existed or just don't even really know about Michael Bradley. He ended up being the 17th pick with the Toronto Raptors. I know he only played 1 year, but a second-team All-American, a guy that almost single-handedly carried a team that, I mean, Jay Wright took it over the next year. He couldn't get him to the NCAA tournament either. He almost single-handedly got that group into the big dance. Bradley was a special player, and he was also ahead of his time, David. He was a big that could stretch the floor, hit outside jumpers, and put the ball on the floor a little bit, which you didn't see a ton of back in the early part of the century.
No, and I mean, you know how I like my big wings, my forwards who can get out and shoot it. And Bradley, I mean, like you said, he's overlooked because it's easy to forget about guys who were the best player on not a great team. But he was a really solid piece. And if there had been a couple more pieces around him, I think that team would have made it to the tournament. And you can't argue with getting to the NBA. He had the talent. He struggled a little bit, but I mean, he had a solid career.
He lasted a little less than a decade, never really found the right fit in the NBA. When he got to the Raptors, they were good, so he didn't have a lot of playing time early. I think that was a big part of the problem for Michael Bradley at the professional level. He actually got into college coaching for a little bit. A really interesting story. If you want to Google Michael Bradley's name, he actually went with his family, and they went and lived abroad right before the pandemic for 2 years, homeschooled their kids, and just went out and wanted to teach them about the world. So very interesting guy, but I think a really underrated basketball player. And I want to be very careful how I say this because I do not want to be disrespectful to Steve Lapis. Steve Lapis was a very good basketball coach, particularly early in his tenure at Villanova. He took over for a legend and he succeeded. He got them to the NCAA tournament 4 times. He had them as a top 3 seed multiple times over the course of his Villanova career. But things had run their course at the end. And this was his last chance, really. He knew it was starting to get stale. He knew the fans were starting to get frustrated. He had to try to make something happen. He brought Michael Bradley in. It brought some life to the program. It made that team 1,000 times more fun to watch. And then Michael Bradley kind of really fit perfectly for Villanova fans with the beauty of hindsight. He was good. He almost got him to the tournament, but he didn't. And then he decided to declare for the NBA draft. And why was that important? Well, with no Michael Bradley coming back and another missed NCAA tournament, that was when Villanova kind of decided to give the old nudge to Steve Lapis when Jay Wright was in the midst of getting the Rutgers job. Villanova all of a sudden, in the span of about 48 hours, decided time to move on. Steve, we appreciate all you've done for the program. Lapis was able to resign and go take the job at UMass. And 48 hours later, Jay Wright had gotten the head coaching job. And the rest, obviously, is what we're going to talk about with the final 4 names on our list. But, you know, Bradley, if Bradley had been either just a little bit better getting that team over the finish line or a little bit worse and had to come back for another year, I don't think we ever get the Jay Wright era. So if for nothing else, that was a very underrated thing that he did for this program.
No, I agree. Can't.
The butterfly effect. It's amazing how
exactly
what that could have meant for
imagining Jay Wright walking the sidelines at Rutgers.
I don't. No, that's a nightmare. That's not a dream that I want to think about whatsoever. I do like reminding Rutgers fans though about it. They get quite annoyed. I believe would be the best way to describe it. All right, so that is our number 5. Let's take a look at our number 4. Daniel Ochefu, the national championship winning center. He graduated in 2016. Our North Carolina graduate. You know, he's done a good job coming over to the dark side, embracing the Villanova culture, really paying attention. But he is still a Tar Heel at heart. That that shot you see right behind me in the background there, Chris Jenkins knocking down that jumper, it still pains David White. And it was Daniel Ochefu's quick thinking when he went
The
and
biggest
wiped off
screen in Villanova history at half court.
where he dried it off the court because he knew it was going to happen. And somehow none of the coaching staff for North Carolina could let their players know, hey, he might set a screen there. Be alert for that. But, I'll just let you think about that over and over and over again. But let's talk about Daniel Ochefu, because here's a guy that was a top 50 recruit in the country coming out of Downingtown East. And I think that the expectations for him were sky high. And a lot of Villanova fans thought he would be an instant contributor and a guy that was a potential star. And remember, when he came into the program, that was during the dry spell for Jay Wright, that 2-year era where it really dipped, where they were struggling, then they missed the tournament, bottomed out with that 13-win team. And that's the stage that Daniel Ochefu stepped onto. And he didn't have a ton of success right away. He was okay as a freshman, but he really played behind Mufjaru and was not the impact that Villanova fans thought he would be. But to Ochefu's credit, he got better every single season. He was the Big East most improved player as a sophomore. He was the Big Five most improved player as a junior. And by the time things were all said and done after his senior season, he was one of only 8 players in the history of the program to score 1,000 points and grab 900 career rebounds. He helped them win a national championship. His defense might be the reason why he's on this list. His rim protection was critical for those Villanova teams, especially in their runs in March during his time on the main line.
Well, I think the best thing you can say about Ochefu is he played his role. He knew who he was. He knew what he did well. He knew who his teammates were. I mean, you had Chris Jenkins, you had Brunson, you had Josh Hart on that team, not to mention Ryan Archidiakono running the point. Ochefu knew what he did well, and he did it. He didn't force. He didn't try and do anything outside of his comfort zone. And, I mean, it takes a lot for a player who, like you said, was a top 50 recruit, had a lot of talent, to say, I'm willing to accept a backseat role and allow these other guys to be the scorers offensively. But I don't think Nova wins that championship without Ochefu. He was as integral to that team as anybody else on the court.
And that's why we have him on the list, because his stats won't necessarily wow you, although 1,000 points, 900 rebounds is pretty darn good. Again, only 8 guys in the history of the program have ever done it. But his senior year, the way he filled that role, I mean, averaging 10 points, 9 rebounds per game, 63% field goal percentage, though, his last year with the Wildcats. And on a team that was that talented and that deep offensively, they needed an inside presence, but they couldn't afford a big guy that was going to take him out of the rhythm of the offense. Ochefu did, his range improved over the course of his Villanova career, but he was not a guy that was going to step out to the perimeter. So he had to figure out a way with that extra pass Villanova ball movement that was so perimeter oriented to keep Ochefu involved. He found it with a mid-range jumper, the offensive rebound. He excelled at that. He was as good at reading where a ball was going to come off the rim on a missed 3-point shot as anybody in recent Villanova history. He could tip balls to keep them alive. He could alter shots. He fit that team like a glove. And again, that's a national championship winning team. And yet, I think when a lot of people think of that team, obviously Jenkins, because he made the shot, Hart, because of what he's gone on to do in his pro career, Bridges, Brunson, who was not as big a role at that stage of his career, but still very important to that team. And then Archidiakono, the heart and soul of that team. I just don't think, heck, I think more people think of Phil Booth a lot of times than Daniel Ochefu, because Booth came through so big in that championship game against North Carolina. If Jenkins doesn't make that game-winning shot, if they just hold on to that 10-point lead and don't collapse to get it into a tie game at the end, Phil Booth is the one everybody remembers from that championship as the hero. And I just think Ochefu somehow kind of gets put on the back burner more than he deserves. He was a really good player and a critical piece on a championship winning team that really cemented Villanova as that level program.
Well, and I also think that Ochefu he was a traditional big. Like you said, he wasn't going to stretch the floor at a time when we now see what basketball is, where it's mostly five out. He was in that era where there was a switch in basketball, where we stopped playing with traditional bigs, but he wasn't a liability defensively. He was able to guard his man. So, like, kudos to him to be able to fit that role so well. I mean, that it's got to be hard to have to. One, you're just going to body somebody up in the post, and then you have to guard them on the perimeter as well. So, the fact that he was able to do that and not be a guy who's consistently giving up baskets because he's getting beat on off the dribble every time is pretty impressive as well.
Indeed, his defense and Jay Wright guard you. We talk about it all the time. Guards were what paid the bills, but they were always their best when they had a big. I mean, 18 Spellman national championship, 16 Ochefu national championship, and their other Final Four teams. Obviously, Jeremiah Robinson Earl was a very good player for a team that didn't quite get as far for Villanova, but then Jermaine Samuels filled that role as a big his final year at Villanova. Jay Wright's last year there when they got to the Final Four. And then the man that is next on our list helped Villanova to a Final Four. That's Dante Cunningham as the big for the Wildcats. And the reason why Dante Cunningham makes this list for me, here's a guy that went on to play a decade in the NBA and I think turned himself into a really good basketball player. And he had almost two separate careers during his time at Villanova. When he arrived on campus with the Wildcats, that was the end of the Randy Foye, Allen Ray, Curtis Sumter era. And when Sumter got hurt going into what was supposed to be his senior year, now all of a sudden Will Sheridan becomes a starting forward, and Villanova is in need of an extra guy. And the person they had to turn to was true freshman Dante Cunningham. The problem with that was Dante Cunningham was not quite ready to fill that type of role on that type of team at that stage of his career. He couldn't shoot the basketball. He was in the mid 30s free throw percentage wise deep into his freshman year. In fact, so much they were chanting his free throw percentage at him when he was at the free throw line at the Carrier Dome one time his freshman season, which had to be real tough on the psyche. And Jay Wright talked about it all the time. We've put Dante in a tough spot. He's handling it as well as you could possibly imagine. And he was so proud of the way Cunningham came through it. He actually made a game-winning layup at one stage of his freshman year to win a big game against Cincinnati. He had a big second round performance against Arizona, a lot of critical rebounds in a close win for the Wildcats. So he became a glue guy. And it looked like into his sophomore year, when his role started to grow, that was still what he was going to be. But suddenly he goes between his sophomore and his junior year, and he works with the Villanova staff, and he develops himself a mid-range jumper that became wildly automatic. I mean, Dante Cunningham was as efficient from 15 to 19 feet as arguably anyone during the Jay Wright era, his last 2 years with the Wildcats. The guy just never missed. He had the spot in the short corner where he could knock down jumpers just beyond the elbow and just inside the top of the key. Those three spots. Remember the Full House episode with Uncle Jesse where he could make a shot from one spot on the floor? That was Dante Cunningham his junior and senior year. He had his three spots. He would go to him, they'd run the offense through it, and he knocked down the shot. He was that type of an automatic player, and that was hard work, and he willed himself into it. And he was a big part of a team that got to a Final Four. And because of what happened after him, I just don't think people remember how big he was for this program.
No, I think, like you said, the ability to hit those shots really opened up the floor for Scottie Reynolds and Corey Fisher. I mean, when you're just a guy who, it's like when the Cavs brought Shaq in to play with LeBron, and it's like you're just putting a mountain in the middle of the lane for a guy who wants to drive. Well, Cunningham, for a while in his career, nobody respected that shot. So why are they going to go out and guard it? The ability to step out and hit a 15-footer, just it opened up the offense. And like you said, I mean, getting to the Final Four or the Sweet 16 in 09, that was, I mean, I think he was his ability to change his game is important. Also, just his offensive and defensive rebounding. He was a good rebounder, kept balls alive for the offense. I
Yeah, I mean, I think his ability to rebound the basketball is why he stuck around as long as he did in the NBA. I mean, that kind of goes without saying. And his length defensively was pretty important as well. And you go back to those Villanova teams, he was on there with his childhood friend Dwayne Anderson, who didn't develop until his last couple years. Dwayne Anderson, who's been on the coaching staff for the last almost decade or so, until he finally moved on this past offseason. But he was a big part of that team with Dante Cunningham and Shane Clark also. I mean, Shane Clark had those long arms, and he was the guy that could
Mhm.
stretch the floor. He could knock down the 3-point shot. But if especially in Jay Wright's system, to shoot a mid-range jumper, because Jay was one of the first guys that did the math. Three's better than two, right? So let's
Yeah.
take the 3-point shot and let's shoot him up and sleep in the streets if it doesn't go in. So to shoot that mid-range jumper, you better be pretty darn good at it. And Dante Cunningham was so good at it, he got the green light. And it became kind of a staple where if teams were taking away the perimeter or Villanova was struggling, that's where they kind of got themselves healthy. They would get the ball to Cunningham. He'd knock down a couple jumpers, and it would change the way defenses were guarding.
Yeah, I agreed. I could. I don't know. I mean, he did what needed to be done. I guess that's what you can say about Dante Cunningham. Is he did what needed to be done.
That's a pretty big compliment, too. I mean, when you think about it,
Mm.
that's really all you can ask for out of a basketball player. Speaking of guys who did what needed to be done, how about number two on our list, Saddiq Bey? And, I think we're going to do a show at some point this summer of top five what could have been guys, and Saddiq Bey might be on that list as well. Because remember, he only played 2 years at Villanova. He went pro after his sophomore season, and the pandemic wiped out his final March run with the Wildcats. And that was a team that, to me, was peaking at the right time. They had just won a huge game late in the regular season at Seton Hall to earn themselves a share of the Big East championship. Most people thought they were going to be anywhere from a 2 to a 4 seed, depending on what happened to the Big East tournament. But it was that typical Jay Wright team that was peaking come March. And Saddiq Bey was the mainstay on it. And his last year, David, he was the best small forward in the country. And that's not an opinion. He won the
Yeah.
Julius Erving Award. I mean, the kid, it was just remarkable to watch him score the ball and then play pretty much every position defensively.
I mean, he shot 45% from three, which is pretty impressive for a forward. So yeah, yeah, he could score the ball with the best of them. Obviously, his NBA career, we'll see what happens with it. Where's he now? He's in
He just
uh,
got traded
to
Houston, I believe. No, he was in the Houston deal. Washington. He's a Wizard now.
Washington. So yeah, we'll see what he's able to do out in Washington. But I mean, 45% 3-point shooter, 75% free throw shooter. He did pretty much everything well. Uh, so what could you say about his game? He was a great defender as well. I mean, I think again, you're bringing me all the 6'8" and above forwards who can stretch the floor. So I love it.
By the way, quick correction. He was involved in that trade with Houston and with Washington. It's Atlanta where he ends up. So he's down with the
Atlanta.
Hawks. A lot of moving pieces. That was that Villanova on Villanova trade too that we saw that we talked about.
Yeah.
But the other thing about Saddiq Bey, you mentioned the 45% 3-point shooting. But how about the fact that the guy was the most efficient player in the country on catch and shoots with under 10 on the shot clock? The guy, when the clock was winding down, that's where the ball went. And every defense knew it, and it didn't matter. They couldn't do anything about it. And I just think if he had gotten that March run and that team goes even to an Elite Eight, but if they do
Mm-hmm.
make their way to a Final Four and he gets his send off, the proper one he deserves, he'd be
Yeah.
viewed in a much different light by Villanova fans. And it's not his fault that he didn't get that. And maybe we're not underrating him. Maybe we're just he didn't get that opportunity, and it's more of a boy, what could have been, and you always
Yeah.
look back at the hypothetical fondly. But man, I view him as a guy that he was if he was on the 16, 18 teams, my goodness. I mean, the 18 team was unstoppable anyway, but that would have even taken it to the next level.
Exactly. I mean, I think you're coming off of a national championship. He comes in, he doesn't quite get there, so yeah, it's easy to forget about him. But how about you? You got stats guys back there pulling out that most efficient under 10 seconds on the shot clock.
Well, remember that was the season that ended, and then we couldn't do anything for, like, 3 months, so I had a lot
Yeah.
of time to read about what could have been as I just wondered, "Boy, this Villanova." I really did think that
Who are you
team.
paying back there to look these stats up?
But the paywall, that's what you gotta make sure we find the paywall. But it is when a guy gets drafted by the NBA, there's no shortage of information out there as well. I believe that came from NBA.com. Just wanna make sure I give credit to the right people. But I do, and the other thing about Saddiq Bey too that I think that people forget is, they won the national championship in 2018. He comes in as a freshman in 2019, and that team, remember, it was gutted. Dante
Yeah.
DiVincenzo was supposed to come back. Amari Spellman was supposed to come back. That
Hmm.
blueprint went up in smoke when they both declared for the draft after the Wildcats win it in 18. And that team was missing pieces. So young guys like Saddiq Bey were pressed into service maybe a little bit sooner than anticipated. Bey was going to play early in his career, but I don't think he was going to be a mainstay. And there were some growing pains early in his freshman season. But by the end of his freshman season, he had figured it out. And that's a pretty quick learning curve. You don't know. I mean, heck, Jalen Brunson took most of his rookie season to figure it out at Villanova before he really became the Jalen Brunson that we all remember. And Saddiq Bey was able to really make it click within a couple months span, which is, I think, a really another impressive thing about what he was able to do.
Yeah, and I mean the jump he made even between his freshman and sophomore year was pretty impressive as well. Like so he was in the gym getting up shots, working with coaches to become an even better player his sophomore year.
All right, so we have unveiled four of our five names. Before we give you who, in our mind, is the most underrated player, and this might be a little controversial. Spoiler right now. I like going the controversial route on these lists. We'll see what you have to say when we unveil the number one. But want to make sure we give our two just missed the cuts, our honorable mentions here. One, we just alluded to him, Omari Spellman. Again, it's funny. I liked all guards in the one-on-one game, and he's underrated at guard U. I start to lean towards the bigs because we talk about the guards, we celebrate the guards at Villanova. That's the culture of the program, right? But the bigs, in many ways, I think, are what allowed this team to win. And Omari Spellman, while his stats didn't necessarily wow you, and the
Mhm.
NCAA absolutely screwed him out of his freshman season and probably screwed Villanova out of potential three-peat. If Omari Spellman plays in 2017, I know I'm talking to a North Carolina guy, so he won't agree with this, but I think at the minimum, that team's a Final Four team, and I like their chances of the rematch against North Carolina with Spellman as a McDonald's All-American caliber big out there. That was the thing that Villanova team was lacking in 2017 and allowed Wisconsin to upset them in the second round. But I digress. I think Omari Spellman, he single-handedly won the most talented Villanova team of my lifetime and one of, if not the best college basketball teams of the first quarter century or of the first 25 years of this century. Uh, Omari Spellman saved them in the Sweet 16 against West Virginia on both sides of the floor, scored three straight buckets, blocked a shot that got the fans all fired up. People forget they were losing
Yeah.
midway through the second half of that Sweet 16 game against Bob Huggins' West Virginia team. And Spellman keyed the rally. Spellman was huge. Spellman had a big rebounding game in the Elite Eight. He was monumental in their Final Four win and just made all the glue plays. And for a guy that was known as a scorer coming out of high school and could knock down the three, that was the other nice thing about Omari Spellman, a big that could drain threes when he got going.
You're
But
just talking my language. I don't know why you think guards are going to win these one-on-one matchups.
But Omari bought into the glue stuff, which was the big question because he was a sophomore by age, but he was a freshman by experience in that 2018 season. And it's
Mhm.
hard to count on guys with that type of experience level to buy into the little things. And his attention to detail was really impressive and a big part of the reason why that team got to the heights that it did.
Definitely. I mean, he should, again, a big. He's stepping out. He's shooting almost 35% from three, um, over 50% from the field. He did his job, especially again, I keep saying these guys did their job. And I think for a lot of people, the underrated players are the guys who you don't think of as the star of the team. They're the guys who were, like you said, the glue guys who just stay there. They do what they're supposed to do. They don't try and force up shots. And he was a guy who you had Brunson, you had DiVincenzo on that team, and he was willing to take a back seat again. I don't know why I keep saying again and I keep saying take a back seat, but that's where we are.
Hey, man, you gotta whatever you're feeling, you just go with that. Don't second guess yourself. You're gonna be second guessing my list in a second if that's the way you feel about these underrated players, especially when you see us unveil number one. But we got one more honorable mention, and that's Allen Ray. And Allen Ray is a guy that is beloved around this program. He is a big source of fodder on social media. He's turned himself into an agent, which is incredibly cool on the NIL scene, and a guy that I think Villanova fans truly love. But I think he's almost turned into a guy because he's so beloved in his post-playing career. They forget how good he was as a player. Always got maybe a little overshadowed by Randy Foye. And then the fact that, quite frankly, Kyle Lowry turned into what Kyle Lowry did tail end of his
Mm-hmm.
career. And Allen Ray struggled from the perimeter in the NCAA tournament. He'd be the first person to admit that. He had some rough games that cost Villanova, but here is a guy that made so many clutch shots over the course of his career and
Shooter.
was a huge part of turning Villanova around under Jay Wright. And without that initial class, who knows? Remember, Jay Wright was starting to run out of time early in his career, at least with the fan base.
Mm-hmm.
People were getting frustrated with Jay Wright. That seems impossible to believe now, but it took a little bit to get this thing rolling. They had some NCAA issues with the phone card stuff, all minor things, but the frustration was high because also the last 3 years of the Steve Lapis era didn't go well. So people were a bit fed up, and Allen Ray was a big part of making that all go away. And those teams were as fun to watch as really any Villanova teams that we've seen.
I mean, it's shooter, shooter, shooter. He could he could light it up. I mean, everybody struggles sometimes in the tournament. The lights get bright. You miss a few shots. I mean, you go on a cold streak, but I don't think that in any way dims what he was able to do over his career at Nova. And I think you're right that he gets overshadowed just by the guys he played with. Unfortunately for Allen Ray, but I'm sure he's enjoying his life just fine.
Yeah, Allen Ray. Hopefully, we're going to have him on at some point as a guest. He is a quasi member of the Big East Energy Network family, so we're hoping to also get A Ray on at some point as well. But we have reached the number one position on our most underrated guys of the last 25 years of Villanova basketball. And David, it was funny the way you described it earlier. So there's two types of underrated, right? There's the glue guys that don't necessarily get the stardom or the fame during the course of their playing careers. But when you look back, you realize, boy, how important these guys were to the team. And we
Mm-hmm.
have a few of those on the list. Then there's the stars that maybe as good as they were, because Villanova had so much success over these last 25 years, you don't remember them at the top of the list, or they don't come off the tongue as quickly as maybe they should. They're overshadowed by some of the guys that have come more recently. And remember, we are a prisoner of the moment in our
Yeah.
society, right? It's kind of the attention span it's not even 24 hours anymore, 24 seconds. If you have that, you're a pretty good attention span person in this day and age. So I went with number one in that vein. I think this guy is wildly underrated now for what he was able to do during his Villanova career, even though he's a Hall of Famer. And even though, I mean, if you said name 10 Villanova guys, I'm pretty sure this guy's on the list of 80% of Villanova fans. But because I'm only pretty sure, that's why he's number one on the list. Scottie Reynolds. Here's a guy that single-handedly lifted a team to the Final Four. Here's a guy that ended his playing career second all-time leading scorer at Villanova, 2,222 points. Also as the sixth-ranked career assist guy in program history. He could do it all. He carried the team offensively almost by himself early in his career. Then as they got more talented and as guys like Dante Cunningham and Dwayne Anderson found their offensive games, he switched to a guy that could score when they needed to, but also became a distributor. He did it all except play defense. That was not Scottie's specialty, but he did everything else. And yet he is, when he left Villanova, he would have been, it was Kerry Kittles one, and you could argue Scottie Reynolds too. And now I just think he's so far down on the list of names you'd rattle off. And you know what? Understandably so. They won 2 championships since. 2 championships is better than a Final Four trip, but it doesn't diminish what Reynolds did during his Villanova career.
Yeah, I think you might have him a little high, but because just of his star power, I mean, he was the best
Cover of
player.
Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, the best player on that team. But like you said, I think he does get overlooked because you have guys who went on to win national championships, have gone on to have better NBA careers, and unfortunately, I think we're in an era now where your NBA career also somehow shadows how well you were as a college player, which makes no sense. But yeah, he's definitely underrated in that sense that if you had asked me, it would have taken me a couple thoughts to get to Scottie Reynolds before I got there.
And that's my point. That fundamentally is my point. And and you follow the game oh so closely. And yeah, I don't think that he would have been in your top 5. I think he would have been in your top 10, but I think he would have been on the bottom portion of your top 10. There would have been a lot of names you rattled off, and yet he's the 3rd all-time leading scorer in program history. He's top 6 in assists, and he's a guy. He has arguably Chris Jenkins has the most memorable play in school history. That's obviously not debatable. The second most memorable play in school history, I don't think there's one, unless you want to count Dwayne McClain falling down and cradling the ball in 85, as Brent Musburger says, that's it, Villanova has done it. But that's not necessarily a basketball play. So I think the second most famous play in Villanova history is Scottie Reynolds driving the length of the floor and beating Pitt to go to the Final Four. And right? I mean, that is the play, and yet he's so far down the list, and the numbers would indicate that he would be higher on the list. The memorable play in terms of the legendary play would indicate he would be higher on the list, and I just feel like he has been downtrodden more than he deserves.
I think he's the guy that if you watched him play, you would start to make a list of the best Villanova players, and you would forget Scottie Reynolds, and then somebody would say, "What about Scottie Reynolds?" And you would say, "Oh, now I have to reorder this list. He's got to be up there." So I think he's highly regarded. It's just a matter of remembering what he did, remembering before the championships, remembering that Final Four run, and then realizing, "Oh yeah, I think he's definitely got to be in the top 5 for me."
But that's what I'm saying.
I wouldn't have
isn't
put
that
him
by
there.
definition? Isn't that by definition underrated? I mean, because if he means that much to the program, and if he's a guy that once you remind people, hey, Scottie Reynolds, oh yeah, how could I have forgotten Scottie Reynolds? But so many people will forget Scottie Reynolds. Scottie Reynolds is almost never mentioned when you hear people discuss Villanova on both the national scene or by Villanova fans, really even. And again, it's completely understandable. They surpassed it by what they did later in Jay Wright's tenure at Villanova. But I mean, the other thing that's kind of funny is I still think you'll hear more guys talk about Randy Foye and Allen Ray and obviously Kyle Lowry because of what he went on to do in the NBA than you do Scottie Reynolds. And I love Randy Foye, Kyle Lowry, and Allen Ray. They were huge parts of the Villanova program, but they never made a Final Four. Scottie Reynolds carried a team to the Final Four. He was the best player by a wide margin on a Final Four team. And while Villanova was able to do that with more regularity than they have at any point in their history, that's still not something that you should be taking for granted.
Yeah, especially to lead a team to a Final Four in that era. It was before the transfer portal. It was when still the best teams had guys for 2 and 3 years. So they were still building a culture based off of having the top 50 recruits in the country on the floor night in and night out. So, like, yeah, I mean, I think it's very impressive. I don't even think impressive is the word that should be used. What Scottie Reynolds was able to do to carry that team to the Final Four.
And one other thing that I think people downplay in terms of the importance of Scottie Reynolds. Remember, that's still relatively early in Jay Wright's tenure, right? Kyle
Mm-hmm.
Lowry, everybody, that was the stage of college careers where some guys were going 1 or 2 and go, but a lot of guys were going 3 and out. And
Yeah.
most people thought because Kyle Lowry was hurt as a freshman, didn't have his best season as a sophomore, was kind of up and down, he was going to come back for one more year. That was the plan for Villanova. In fact, there was a lot of conjecture of, was he a first-round pick? Wasn't he a first-round pick? He went through the entire draft process. Finally, the NBA kind of came back with, yeah, it's a first-round grade. You are probably going to be a first-round
Mm-hmm.
pick. So Lowry decides to go. And now at that stage, Villanova didn't have a backup plan. They did not have a point
Yeah.
guard waiting in the wings. Kelvin Sampson, though, decides to leave Oklahoma for Indiana pretty late in the process. And Reynolds had been committed at Oklahoma for months at that point. And
Mm-hmm.
Jay Wright hadn't even really recruited Scottie Reynolds out of high school because he had committed to Oklahoma so early in the process. But as Villanova's scrambling and now Reynolds opens up his recruitment, Jay Wright starts to look at him, and first of all, he kind of reams out his assistants like, why weren't we in on this guy? What are we doing here? Let's make sure we are crossing our T's, dotting our I's on the recruiting process. But he saved Villanova in a lot of ways. Remember when things stalled a few years later with Jay Wright, it took him a couple years to get it going again.
Yeah.
And they were in danger of that same type of stall because that was a huge amount of production they lost between Randy Foye, Allen Ray, and then Kyle Lowry goes pro. Curtis Sumter trying to come back from injury. You were hopeful he was going to be the same type of player he was before he got hurt. He just wasn't himself after the second ACL, and he kind of limped his way through that last year at Villanova. Will Sheridan was a great role player on those teams, but he wasn't going
Mm-hmm.
to be a guy that could carry the lion's share of an offense. So they needed a scorer, and that's what Reynolds provided as a freshman to Villanova, and then he just kept getting better and better. So for me, aside from what he did at the end of his career, which was monumental, one of the other reasons why I think he is underrated in terms of his importance to Villanova is what he did bridging the Wildcats from that Randy Foye era of all offense, fast
Yeah.
pace, electric basketball to the more, and this is kind of funny because, again, Scottie Reynolds was never the world's best defensive player, but that team became more of a gritty defense first and then
Mm-hmm.
execute on offense type of team. And he was a big part of that bridge. And without him, I don't know how long that process takes. It certainly doesn't go anywhere near as well as it did when they got to the second round of the NCAA tournament in 2007. And who
No.
knows? They're not going to the Final Four in 09 without Scottie Reynolds. We know that.
I mean, everybody remember we talked about the drive-in game winner against Pitt. He scored 15 in the last 4 minutes of that game to even get to the Final Four. I mean, that's amazing.
He took that game over. And the crazy
Yeah.
part is that though is another perfect example of how Scottie Reynolds kind of evolved over the course of his college career because, he struggled the first 3 games of that tournament. He was
Mm-hmm.
not making shots. I think he was shooting 22% from 3-point range over the first 3 wins in the NCAA tournament. The game they almost lost to American, then the second round rout of UCLA. He didn't have a big part in that. And even when they blew out Duke, he had a good game, but he was like 5 of 15, 5 of 16 from the field. He was
Yeah.
struggling with his shot. And to while you're struggling with the shot, down the stretch of an Elite Eight game, just to get behind me, boys, give me the ball. I'm carrying us to the finish line, and then to go do it. I mean, I think the other reason why Scottie Reynolds gets a tad underrated, he came back for his senior year, and his senior year didn't go nearly as well as his junior year did. I mean, they were a 2 seed. but they were collapsing down the stretch. That team just
Yeah.
there was something off with that team. And remember, that was what was the ugly the St. Mary's game where they just got. I mean, it was ugly in the second half of that game against St. Mary's. That was his final calling card as Villanova player. And I think maybe that hurts
Mm-hmm.
his legacy just a little bit because it left maybe a bitter taste in people's mouths. But that doesn't overshadow everything else he did over the course of his career. And to me, again, Scottie Reynolds should roll off the tip of your tongue. He's a true Villanova
Yeah.
legend, and I just think he's so far down the list. That's why I have him at the top of the underrated list.
I understand. A little high for me, but I get it. Especially when it comes to the national media. I think that the national media would totally forget and disregard Scottie Reynolds. I think that Nova fans know Scottie Reynolds. I don't know about.
No doubt. I just again, and Scottie Reynolds is a Villanova legend. I don't want to make
Yeah.
it seem like, oh my God, who's Scottie Reynolds? I mean, maybe some teenage Nova fans might say that, but that's kind of just the way the teenage brain works. But in terms of like the core Villanova fans, but I do think a lot of them, it's exactly what you said. You're rattling off names, and you're going to go Brunson. You're going to go Arcidiacono. And look, Arcidiacono was huge. He got the program back after it had fallen off under Jay Wright. Jay Wright said he was as important a piece as we've ever had. But Scottie Reynolds was a much more productive player over the course of his Villanova career. And yet, like, I think if you ask 100 Villanova fans who is a better lead guard, Ryan Arcidiacono or Scottie Reynolds, he's going to be like 65-35 Ryan Arcidiacono. And while I mean, you could argue you'd rather have Ryan Arcidiacono with the pieces around him that Jay Wright was able to put into place. I mean, by every measurable piece, Scottie Reynolds was a better college basketball player.
Yeah, I mean, pound for pound is Scottie Reynolds, but like you said, I mean, Arcidiacono ran that offense so well with the guys around him that I don't know if Scottie Reynolds can do that because Scottie Reynolds he's a look for his shot first point guard.
Right.
He's not a pass first point guard.
He was a poor man's Allen Iverson, is the way that they used to describe him all the time. And I think that was an apt description. All right, so that's my top 5 most underrated. David doesn't like the list again. He thinks I screwed up the order. I think the names are right. I'm real proud of the Michael Bradley one because to be blatantly honest, when I was going through the names, I kind of forgot about Michael Bradley. And then I remembered him and I was like, oh, yeah, that guy has to be. He's an All-American. And I kind of forgot that he even existed for a little bit. So, yeah, I like that. Ochefu helped win a national championship and is so far down the list on that championship team in a lot of people's minds. Cunningham's improvement and how long he lasted in the NBA. Saddiq Bey, oh man, what could have been? What could have been with Saddiq Bey? And then I disagree with you. Scottie Reynolds he is one. He stays one. That's the list. That's my list. We're sticking with it. All right. Last thing, I want to get your lawyer's perspective. More news. Ross Dellinger just came out with it earlier today. I believe we had this one, David. I think that we predicted this. The college sports, what is
the College Sports Commission?
College Sports Commission is what they finalized on to name this. The CSC was going to partner with Deloitte, figure out what people could and could not do for name, image, and likeness deals. They were going to try to control the market, make them true name, image, and likeness, and make sure that guys weren't just getting paid to play under a different moniker. And one of the big ways they were going to accomplish this was through the revenue share, which they've gone ahead and done, but also they were going to try to minimize the impact of collectives. They were going to try to funnel all that money to the schools, and then pay the players, which I think everybody enjoys the fact that they're going to pay the players. But we were all really trying to figure out how they were going to get away with telling people what they could make on the side. Well, it turns out they don't think that they can do that anymore either because they've come to an agreement that they're going to leave the collectives alone and let them go to work in the kitchen, so to speak. And it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to be back to pretty much the exact same system we had before, only now the players are going to get $20 million directly from the schools on top of whatever the collectives give them out.
That's exactly what this settlement does. It sends us right back to the NIL that we've known for the last 5 years. Plus, now schools can pay 20.5 million to football and men's basketball, and then sprinkle it out among the other sports. I mean, we predicted this. It's just a fact of the matter that once you start denying those collectives from paying certain players, they're going to be big enough donors and big enough schools that are going to say, wait a minute, this isn't what we agreed to. We still want that advantage as well. So, I mean, I didn't think it would happen this quickly. We haven't even gotten to a football season yet, and the CSC is already a toothless entity that basically it's going to treat all collective deals as if they're third party business deals. Like that's crazy. It's an arms race that I don't think anybody is prepared to join in.
It just Tom Mars, who was the lawyer extraordinaire in college athletics. Once you saw he was involved, you knew that the college administrators were in a world of hurt. He excels in these roles. He was the guy that was able to keep winning cases for Jim Harbaugh, even though they pretty much
Mm-hmm.
had Jim Harbaugh dead to right. But Tom Mars figured out a way to make it work out for him. And he was the guy that, the one thing they thought they had was because it was the type of case that they put together,
Mm-hmm.
the legalese on it. I'm drawing a blank, not a collective. The way they
Yeah. Uh, um, Class action.
class action lawsuit. That's why we got a lawyer here, ladies and gentlemen. It took them a little longer, but with class action lawsuit, when you have a class action lawsuit, correct me if I'm wrong on this. So if you get involved in the class, part of the settlement was now you can't sue. So
Yeah.
you had to find somebody who had standing to sue.
Mm-hmm.
And that was why they thought, well, maybe we can delay it for a while. And by that time, we'll have this thing in place. The players will be making so much money that we'll be able to get public sentiment on our side. And maybe the judges will leave us alone. And Tom Mars said, no, we're going to figure this out right away. And he sued on behalf of the collectives, which,
Exactly.
I mean, you
They
got to
weren't part
love.
of.
You gotta
They,
love a system where the people are suing so they can give out money. That's
yeah.
basically what just happened.
They weren't part. The players weren't involved. The schools weren't involved. Let's get this third party collective that's just a bunch of donors giving money. It's
Oh,
it's
not
I
good.
mean it's
Not good for the
unint.
Big East, though. In all seriousness,
No, it's not. I mean that advantage that you had if 20.5 million was an actual salary cap plus whatever they can make on the actual free market, then yeah, you have a chance. But to say that you're going to allow a school who has 40,000 undergrads, so their alumni base is huge, and they're going to just keep bringing in money hand over fist to just throw out money through these collectives. I don't know how. I don't know how anybody survives.
at some point, the rich people will, I would imagine, start to demand that there is some return on this investment, and that's when we
Yeah.
end up in private equity. I don't think anybody thinks that goes well long term, but I think
Mm-hmm.
that has to be if we're not going to make them employees, which the schools seem just determined to avoid, then PE has to be the ultimate end piece here, right? Because at some point, you don't become rich by lighting money on fire without any chance to recoup any of it whatsoever. I don't care how
Right.
much you want your team to win. That's a big ask. It's one thing to do it for a
Mm-hmm.
few years. It's another thing to do it over and over and over again. Now, maybe it's a market correction. Maybe the rich people do get sick of it, but it feels
Yeah.
like there's always going to be somebody that's willing to pay at least some money. And then while that happens, what is it like? Does that keep people willing to open up their checkbooks longer than otherwise would, or do they just bottom out? But the point remains for the Big East, as we digress, don't want to go completely down that rabbit hole. The good news is, you know, if you can raise the $20 million through the revenue share, you still don't have the big obligations to football that the other schools do.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, even if the Big East schools couldn't get the full $20 million, which they all seem to feel that they will be able to, but if they can't, it looks like the teams are only allocating about between $1 and $2 million of the revenue share to men's basketball. So it only puts you behind
Yeah.
the 8 ball so far. And then you're going to have to go out and raise the rest. So it kind of just puts you back into the position where you were before. It's not the end of the world, but it
No.
went from where it looked like you might have a real advantage in this thing to that does not see it. You're still going to be a little bit behind the football revenue schools.
Well, I think the best thing that can happen for the Big East now is if that 20.5 million, all of a sudden there are Title IX lawsuits that come out, and now we're having to split that 20 and a half based off of equity of the student body, where I mean most colleges are like 60% women, so 60% of that 20 and a half is going to have to go to women's sports. So that's going to be the best thing to happen for the Big East is even if that happens, because there's not football and there's not that, is it 85 scholarships now or whatever they have,
There's
there's not
no
that.
limit. 115
Oh,
players.
115. There's not 115 guys that you have to go out and keep happy, especially big time quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers. That most of that, even 40% that would fall to men's sports, could go to men's basketball.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many layers to this thing that they're gonna have to get
Mm-hmm.
figured out. I mean, just once you start talking about Title IX, I mean that is its own very, very intricate Rubik's cube that they're going to have to unwind here at some point that they just keep punting down the line. But that is something we will continue to follow. We want to get out of here on the last thing. We are taping this on Tuesday night, July the 22nd. Going to unveil it on Wednesday the 23rd. Yesterday for us on Monday of this week, July 21st. Theo Huxtable, Malcolm Jamal Warner passed away. Did you see that in the news? That's sad. I just
Yeah,
what is
drowning
so
in Costa Rica. Yeah, I mean, I was watching all the old. I mean, the Cosby Show has its problems, but I
yeah.
mean, it was an amazing show, and Malcolm Jamal Warner was great as Theo, and then I don't know if you saw today that Ozzy Osbourne died. So Matt 1 and 2 back to back.
I did not see that about Ozzy Osbourne. That is very unfortunate. I gotta be honest, I had a bit more of a impact on my life, Theo Huxtable than Ozzy Osbourne. I knew of Ozzy from
Yeah,
his reality show days. I didn't know much of
yeah,
his music career, but that's sad. And our thoughts and condolences to his family. You know, when I was a little kid, David, my parents would tell me when we were going on long car rides to kind of assuage me and to get me to figure out how long I was going to have to prepare myself to be in the car. They'd be like, "Well, we're going to your grandparents' house. That's 4 episodes of the Cosby Show. That's how long the car ride is going to be." I loved the Cosby Show. That thing was the best. I know everything happened and very sad with Bill Cosby that unfolded the way it did. But if you separate the person
It
from the
doesn't
show,
change
yeah,
what the Cosby did for TV.
and
And yeah,
for the country, I mean, that was an
yeah.
important show for I
Hmm.
feel like it for the country needed that, and I think it did a lot of good for a lot of people. And boy, I mean, Theo Huxtable, I cannot believe that has happened, and the drowning. I mean, that is so sad
Yeah.
to read in the news. All right, that is going to do it for this. Man, I didn't mean to end it on a bummer note. I mean, we gotta pay deference to Theo. For David White, I'm Janice. We'll be back either later this week or early next. We're trying to get a recruiting expert on to talk about the high school recruiting that Villanova is doing under Kevin Willard. We're also going to do some more list stuff. So, David, get ready to rip me some more. This has been Holy Nova, part of the Big Energy Network.